I want you to think about the last time you were really angry, not slightly irritated, not mildly frustrated, but genuinely deeply angry. Maybe someone betrayed you, maybe something deeply unfair happened, maybe relationship hurts you in a way that still sits in your chest when you think about it. Maybe it was today, maybe it was years ago and it is still there. Now, I want you to think about what happened in your body in that, at that moment. Your heart started beating faster. You cannot feel it. Your muscles tense to your jaw, your shoulders, your feet, your breathing changed. And then it became shorter, quicker. Maybe your head started to pound, maybe your stomach tightened, maybe your face felt hot, maybe your hands were shaking. You felt all of that in your body, because of something that happened or something you were thinking about. Now, here's a question I want us to sit with today. What if those feelings are the anger, the grief, the worry, the loneliness, the unforgiveness you have been carrying around? What if they are not just emotions? What if they are doing something physical inside your body right now that you cannot see, but it is very real? Because that is exactly what the science says. Emotions are not separate from the body, they are not just in your head. Because every single emotion you experience, every flash of anger, every wave of grief, every knot of worry, every moment of loneliness, it triggers a cascade of physical changes inside your body. Chemical changes, hormonal changes, changes in your blood pressure, your immune system, your guts, your heart, your brain. And when these emotions are chronic, when the anger never fully goes away, when the grief sits for years, when the worry is constant, when the loneliness is deep, the physical changes they trigger, they triggers stop being temporary and start being demanding. And so today we're going to talk about all of it. What anger goes to your heart, we are going to talk about what anger does to our hearts, what grief does to our immune system, and what worry does to our guts, what loneliness does to our brain, and what forgiveness does to your body over time, and what joy, laughter, and gratitude actually do inside you, scientifically, measurably, and powerfully. This is not a psychological lecture. This is a healthy conversation. And by the end of today, I want you to see your emotional life in a completely different way, not as something separate from from your physical health, but as one of the most important drivers of it. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Thursday, and I am so glad you're here. I want you to drop a hello in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. And I want to start with something honest. What emotion do you carry more consistently, and not what you feel occasionally, but what sits with you regularly? Is it anger, worry, grief, loneliness, bitterness? Just drop it in the comments. One word, because I want to know what we are carrying in the room, in this room today. My name is Loretta Ngwebe Sibiel, and this is the Safe Delivery Project. And we are the Do Take Action family. Every Thursday at 3 p.m., we show up here and have conversations that actually matter. And today we're going somewhere we have never gone before on this platform. So let us go. All right. Before we get into specific emotions, I want to lay a foundation because I think many people, particularly those of us raised in cultures where we were taught to separate the spiritual, the emotional, and the physical. have a mental model where those things, are completely separate, and the body is the body. Remember, the body is the body, and the feelings are the feelings, and they do not really affect each other. But that is not how the human body works, and science has been proving this for decades. There's a field of medicine um, called called psychoneuroimmunology. This is a very long word, so let me break it down. Psycho relating to the mind and emotions, why neuro relating to the nervous system and brain, and why immunology relating to the immune system. So um psychoneuroimmunology, is a study of how the mind, the nervous system, and the immune system talk to each other and affects each other. And what this field has shown very clearly, very consistently, is that what you feel emotionally has direct measurable effect on your physical health. Let me explain this connection works in, I want to explain how this connection works in simple terms. When you experience an emotion by emotion, your brain processes, and then it triggers a response in your nervous system. Your nervous system has two main modes. The first is called the sympathetic nervous system, and this is your fight or flight mode, and this activates when you perceive a threat, a stress, a danger, and then it releases hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. It speeds up your heart, it raises your blood pressure, it tensens your muscles, it divides blood away from your digestive system and towards your major muscle groups, and so it suppresses your immune system temporarily, and all of this is designed to help you deal with an immediate threat. Now, the second mode is called the parasympathetic nervous system. This is your rest and digest mode. When you're calm, you're safe, at peace, relaxed, this system is dominant and your heart rate slows. Your blood pressure drops, your digestive system works properly, your immune system functions optimally, your body repairs and restores itself. Now, the problem for most people, particularly most Nigerians living with a pressure of daily life, is that the fight or flight mode never fully switches off, and the stresses are constant, the worries do not stop, the anger is never fully resolved. The grief is carried for years, and a nervous system that is permanently in fight or flight mode that never gets to properly enter rest and digest starts to break down. And so the elevated heart rate becomes hypertension, and the suppressed immune system becomes a frequent illness, and so the tense muscles become chronic pain, and the disrupted digestion becomes gut problems. And so the body was designed for short-term stress followed by recovery. What it is getting is permanent stress with no recovery, and the consequences are showing up as disease. And so the key fact is that research from Harvard Medical School and other major institutions constantly shows that chronic psychological stress is a significant independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease, immune dysfunction, gastrointestinal disorders, chronic pain, and mental illness. Emotional health is not separate from physical health. It is one of its most powerful determinants. Now, I'm going to ask my audience, before today, did you know that your emotions have direct physical effects on your body, on your blood pressure, or your immune system, your gut? I want you to type yes if you knew this, or no if this is a new information to you. Okay, so next we are going to start with anger, because you know anger is one of the most powerful and most physical impactful emotions the the human body can experience. Anger is a normal human emotion. It is not inheritedly bad or wrong. It is actually a response that the body is designed to produce, and so it is part of the threat detection system. And when something is genuinely unjust, when a boundary is violated, when someone harms us or someone we love, maybe when someone harm you, or maybe someone make you angry, anger is the appropriate response. And the problem is not anger itself. The problem is what happens when anger becomes chronic, and when it is never expressed, never resolved, never released, but carried in the body year after year. So that is the major thing we're talking about. And I also want to tell you exactly what happened in the body the moment you get angry. The amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure deep in the brain, processes the threat. It sends an alarm signal, and so your adrenal glands, which sit on top of the kidneys, release a surge of adrenaline and cortisol. So your heart rate immediately increases, and sometimes doubling with seconds. And so your blood pressure spikes. Your muscle tense throughout your body, particularly in the neck, shoulders, and jaw. Your blood vessels constrict um, narrowly to increase pressure, and so your breathing becomes rapid and shallow. Your digestive system shuts down. Your liver releases glucose into the blood, to provide immediate energy, and your immune system shifts away from its normal protective mode. And all of this happen in seconds, and it is designed to last for minutes, just long enough to do with whatever triggered the anger and then recover. But what if you get angry and there's nowhere for that anger to go? What if you're hungry but you have to swallow it at work, in a marriage, in a family situation, in a society where expressing anger is not safe or acceptable? What if the thing that made you hungry is not resolved, and the hunger sits there day after day with nowhere to go? That should be the question we all should be asking ourselves. And so research shows that people who experience frequent anger episodes have significantly higher rates of hypertension, because every anger episode spikes the blood pressure, and repeat that hundreds of times over months and years, and the vessels stop fully recovering between spikes. And so the elevated pressure becomes the new baseline, and so hypertension will develop. And so people who suppress anger, who swallow it and never express or process it, have higher rates of heart disease. And a study from the University of Michigan, um, of Michigan, followed thousands of couples over 70 years, and found that couples where both partners suppress anger during conflict at significantly higher rates of early death compared to couples who express their anger constructively. And there is also a connection between chronic anger and inflammation. Anger triggers the release of inflammatory chemicals in the body called cytokines. Short-term inflammation is part of the immune response, but chronic inflammation, driven partly by chronic anger, is one of the underlying mechanisms of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and arthritis. And anger affect the gut, and the gut and the brain are directly connected through something called the gut brain axis, a two-way communication pathway involving the vagus nerve. And when you're angry, your digestive system shuts down, and so chronic anger contributes to acid reflux, stomach ulcers, irritable bowel syndrome, and chronic abdominal pain. So, what does healthy hunger look like? Not suppress swallowing it until it poisons you, not explosion releasing it in a ways that harm you or others, but expression say what you feel clearly and directly in a safe context. Physical release exercise, walking, movement that burns off the stress hormones, and resolution, either addressing the source of the anger or making peace with what cannot be changed. And so the key fact is that a study published in the European Heart Journal found out that the risk of having a heart attack was 8.5 times higher in the 2 hours after an intense anger episode compared to calmer periods. And so anger is not just a feeling in the body, anger is a cardiovascular event. Next, we're going to talk about grief, and I want to approach this with the tenderness it deserves because grief is one of the most universal human experiences. And so, every single person watching today has lost someone or something they love. And the grief that comes with loss is not just emotion, it is profoundly physical. In the immediate period after a significant loss, the loss of the death um, of a loved one, the end of a marriage, the loss of a pregnancy, the loss of a job or a dream, the body goes into a state of acute stress. And the same fight or flight response that hunger triggers is activated by grief. Cortisol and adrenaline flood the system, and so the heart rate elevates, the immune system is suppressed, and the body, which was designed to handle this for short period, is now being asked to carry it for weeks, months, sometimes years. Now, there is a phenomenon that has been documented in the medical literature called broken heart syndrome. The medical term is taco subo cardio um cardiopathy. It is real, measurable, documented condition in which extreme emotional and distress, most commonly the sudden loss of a loved one, causes a temporary weakening of the heart muscle, and the left ventricle of the heart changes shape. Its pulmonary function is impaired. Symptoms mimic a heart attack, chest pain, shortness of breath, abnormal heart rhythms, and most people recover fully, but some do not. And some people, particularly elderly people who have just lost a long-term spouse, do actually die in the days or weeks after losing their partner, not from a blocked artery, but from a broken heart. And this is not a metaphor, this is psychology. And so, beyond the acute period, what does prolonged grief do to the body? It significantly suppresses the immune system, and research has shown that bereaved people have measurable reduced immune function, fewer natural killer cells, reduced antibody response, impaired ability to fight infection, and this is why bereaved people get sick more often, and why they are more susceptible to infection, while illnesses that their body would normally fight off easily take longer to resolve. It's because the immune system is busy carrying the grief. And so grief disrupts sleep, not just difficulty falling asleep, but the quality of sleep changes. The deep restorative sleep that the body needs to repair itself is reduced, and poor sleep, as we know, has cascading effect on everybody's system, which is the heart, the immune system, the hormones, and the brain. And so, grief affects the brain, and brain imaging studies of bereaved people show changes in the prefrontal cortex. And so, the part of brain responsible for decision making, attention, and emotional regulation. And this is why grief makes it hard to concentrate, it's hard to make decisions, it's hard to regulate emotions, it's hard to remember things. So a grief brain is not laziness or weakness, it is a measurable neurological response to loss. And so prolonged grief also affect the cardiovascular system. And so people who are grieving have higher rate of high blood pressure than irregular heart rhythm. And so the risk of having a heart attack is significantly elevated in the weeks after a major bereavement. And grief also affects the gut, loss of appetite, causes loss of appetite, not wanting to eat at all, or the opposite. And so, turning food turning to food for comfort in a way that disrupts normal eating patterns. You know, you're feeling loose, having stomach pain, digestive problems that emerge during periods of intense grief. And so I want to say something important here also. Grief is not something to rush through. It is not something to suppress or avoid. Grief is the natural response to love, the price we pay for having loved something or someone deeply. And attempting to bypass grief, to push it down, to stay busy, to not allow yourself to feel it does not protect the body from its effects. It's prolonged them. And so grief that is processed, that is allowed to be felt, expressed, shared, moved through has a natural hack. It is still painful, but the body finds its way through it. And so grief that is suppressed, that is carried silently without acknowledgement, without expression, without support, stays in the body indefinitely. Allow yourself to grieve. Find safe people to grieve with. Give the grief its space and its time. And if grief is so severe or so prolonged that it is preventing you from functioning, please seek professional support. Complicated grief is a recognized clinical condition that responds to therapy, so you do not have to carry it alone. And also, research from Harvard Medical School found out that the risk of having a heart attack is 21 times higher in the 24 hours following the death of a significant loved ones compared to normal periods. And so the risk remains elevated for weeks. Grief is a cardiovascular event as much as an emotional one. Next, we're going to talk about sorry, yeah, we're going to talk about worry because in Nigeria, where financial pressure, family responsibility, insecurity are uncertainly our daily realities, worry is perhaps the most whispered chronic emotional state of all. What is what happens when the mind projects forward into the future and anticipates danger, loss, or failure. It is the brain's attempts, to prepare for threats that have not happened yet. In short doses, productive worry motivates action. It helps pain prepare and solve problem. But chronic worry, the kind that runs in the background of the everyday regardless of whether the feared thing is actually happening, is one of the most physical demand, um, damaging emotional states a person can experience. Now I'm going to talking about what chronic worry do to the body. Chronic body keeps chronic worry, it keeps the nervous system in a permanent state of low level fight or flight. Cortisol, the stress hormone stays elevated, and chronically elevated cortisol does enormous damage over time. It raises blood pressure persistently, it suppresses the immune system, making you more susceptible to infections and also slowing healing. It disrupts sleeps because a brain that is worrying cannot fully switch off even when the body is exhausted. Chronic worry affects memory and concentration. Cortisol damages the hippocampus, and so the part of the brain responsible for memory formation. It also increases appetite for high calorie um calorie foods, particularly sugar and fat, as the body tries to fuel it, you know to fuel what it thinks is an ongoing emergency. And so this contributes to weight gain and metabolic problems. And it also destroys the gut because chronic cortisol changes the composition of the gut microbiome and impairs digestive function. So chronic worry is also one of the primary drivers of anxiety disorder. And anxiety disorder have profound physical manifestations: chest tightness, palpitations, shortness of breath, trembling, gastrointestinal disturbance, headaches, muscle tension, dizziness. And so people with chronic anxiety regularly present to hospitals with what they believe are heart problems or other physical conditions, only to find that the tests are normal and the symptoms are driven by the anxiety itself. So this does not mean the symptoms are not real, no. They are completely real, but the source is emotional, and treating only the physical symptoms without addressing the underlying anxieties like mopping up water without turning off the mop. So, um, there's also something specific I want to say about money worry, no, because chronic worry. So, I want to talk about money worry because in Nigeria it is most common form of chronic worry, and it deserves to be addressed directly. Financial insecurity triggers the brain stress detection system in a way that it has powerful it is as powerful as physical danger. And so research has shown that thinking about financial problems actually reduces cognitive capacity. It takes up mental bandwidth that would otherwise be available for decision making, problem solving, and emotional regulation. In other words, the constant preoccupation with financial worry, it makes it harder to think clearly about everything else, including how to solve financial problem. Now, the body does not know the difference between worrying about a bill and being chased by a predator. The stress response is the same, and the damage it does over time is the same. And so, what helps with chronic worry? Not telling yourself to stop worrying, that rarely works, but a few things that it genuinely do. So writing worries down, getting them out of the head and onto paper reduces their power. It also helps to identify which worries are actionable where you can actually do something and which are not. For actionable worries, it takes the action and let the worry go. While for worries about things outside your control, which the work is acceptance rather than problem solving. So limiting information consumption in an age of social media and 24 hours news, the amount of worrying content available limitless is limitless. So setting deliberate limits on news and social media consumption significantly reduces anxiety for most people. Now, the physical movement, which exercise is one of the most effective anti-anxiety interventions available. It burns off the stress hormones that worry generates. It releases endorphins that improve mood, and it gives the nervous system a physical outlet for the tension that worry creates. And for worry that is severe and persistent, professional support. A counselor is needed, a psychologist or a trained mental health professional can provide tools and techniques specifically designed to interrupt the cycle of chronic worry. This is not weakness, this is wisdom. Now, I'm going to be talking about something that might surprise you because it is not talked about enough as a health issue, and that is loneliness. Loneliness. Not being alone and being lonely at different things. You can be alone and perfectly content, and you can be surrounded by people and deeply lonely. It happens. So loneliness is the feeling of being disconnected or not having the quality of social connection that you need, or feeling unseen, unknown, unimportant to the people around you. And loneliness is a health emergency. I am not being dramatic because research, serious, peer-reviewed, widely replicated research has shown that chronic loneliness is as damaging to physical health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And so as damaging to the heart as obesity, it increases the risk of heart disease by 29%, the risk of stroke by 32%. It significantly increases the risk of dementia. It shortens lifespan. And so people who are chronically lonely die earlier than people who have strong social connections, even when all other factors are controlled for. Now, why does loneliness have such dramatic physical effects? That's what we're going to be looking at. You know, the, the human body was designed for social connection. We evolved as deeply social creatures. Our survival historical depended on being part of a group. And the body has a biological alarm system for social disconnection, just as it has an alarm system for physical danger. And so when you're lonely, the brain interprets it as a threat to survival, and it activates the stress response. Chronically, lonely people have persistently elevated cortisol. Their immune systems are suppressed, they get sick more often and take longer to recover. Their sleep is disrupted, the brain stays alert even during sleep when it perceives social isolation as a threat. Their cardiovascular system is under chronic strain, and their brain, particularly the areas responsible for threat detection, becomes hypervigilant. So lonely people are more sensitive to negotiate social cues. They see threats in neutral interactions. And so this hypervigilance further reduces the quality of social interactions and deepens the loneliness, creating a cycle that is hard to break. Nigeria is a collectivist culture, a culture that values community, family, and togetherness. And in many ways, that cultural emphasis on community is protective. You know, people who are embedded in strong family and community networks have better health outcomes. And so the support system that comes with a strong community provides genuine physical health benefits. But loneliness is increasingly common in Nigeria cities. You know, people move to Abuja, to Lagos, to Port Harcourt, away from their home communities, their extended families, their support system. They live in apartments where they do not know their neighbors. They go to work and come home. They are surrounded by millions of people and deeply alone. And that loneliness is doing damage that nothing is, that that nobody is naming. And so there is also a specific loneliness that many married people experience, particularly women with, which is being in a relationship without genuine emotional connection, being physically present with someone but feeling unseen or unknown or emotionally alone. And so this form of loneliness is particularly painful because it comes with an extra layer of shame. And how can I be lonely, when I have a family? You hear people saying it, but it is real and it carries the same health risks as other forms of loneliness. And so, what is the antidote to loneliness? We have connection. Connection is one of the antidotes to loneliness. We have real, authentic, mutual connection. I'm not talking about the social media connection. Like this mutual connection, and also not social media connection studies also shows that social media use, particularly passive strolling, actually increases the loneliness rather than reducing it. But genuine human connection, conversations that go beyond the surface, relationships where you are truly known, a community involvement, a church, a neighborhood group, a shared interest, a volunteer activities where you are part of something larger than yourself. So it really, really helps. And so if you are lonely, please reach out. It takes courage because loneliness itself makes reaching out feel risky. But the health consequences of continued isolations are real. And one genuine conversation with one person who truly sees you is medicine for the body as much as the soul. And so the key fact is this is that former US Surgeon General Vivek Murthy called loneliness an epidemic and one of the most pressing public health concerns of our time. 2023 advisory from his office found that approximately half of adults in developed countries report measurable loneliness, and research suggests this rate in rapidly urbanizing countries like Nigeria may be rising significantly. Now, I'm going to ask my audience, do you ever feel lonely even when you are surrounded by people, even in a marriage, a family, a busy life? I want you to type yes if loneliness is something you recognize in your own experience. Now, I want to talk about something that I know is going to touch a nerve because it connects to faith, to culture, to personal history in a very deep ways, and that is unforgiveness. Unforgiveness is a state of holding on to resentment, bitterness, or anger towards someone who has hurt you. It is an inability or unwillingness to release the emotional depth to feel someone owes you, and it is extraordinary common because people are hurt by other people regularly, deeply, and sometimes in ways that are genuinely hard to recover from. I want to be very clear about something before I go further. Forgiveness does not mean what happened to you was okay. No, it does not mean the person who hurt you was right. It does not mean you have to reconcile with them. No. Maintain a relationship with them or pretend the harm did not happen. Forgiveness is not about them at all. Forgiveness is about you. It is about releasing yourself from the ongoing physical and emotional cost of carrying the resentment. Because here is what the research shows, and this remarkable unforgiveness is associated with chronic stress responses in the body. Now, when people think about the person who wronged them or when they reunite over what happened, the body activates the same stress response as if the harmful event is happening right now. And so every time you replay the memory, and every time the hunger had the hot flare up. So every time the resentment surfaces, the blood pressure spikes, the cortisol rises, the immune system is suppressed, the gut tightens, and the heart is under strain. So you're not punishing the person who hurts you by holding on to the resentment. No, no, no. But rather, they have moved on, and if they have not, they are carrying their own consequences. And so, the person who is being harmed by your unforgiveness is you. So, every single day in your body. And research from Johns Hopkins University found that people who practice forgiveness have lower rates of heart disease, lower blood pressure, better immune function, lower rates of depression and anxiety, and better sleep quality than people who carry chronic resentment. And so the act of forgiving genuinely releasing the emotional depth has measurable positive effects on physical health. There's also research specifically on what is called the rule rumination, replaying a hurtful event over and over in the mind. Now, rumination is closely associated with depression and anxiety, and physical rumination keeps the stress and response activated. The body cannot tell the difference between something that is happening now and something you are vividly imagining or remembering. So every time you ruminate on a past thought, the body responds as if it is being hurt again in this moment. Now, what does forgiveness actually look like in practice? It's a process, not a single decision. It is not something that happens once and and it's done. No, it is something that has to be chosen repeatedly. Sometimes, many times a day. It may involve counseling or therapy to process the harm properly. So it may involve prayer and spiritual practice. It may involve deliberately choosing to redirect the mind where rumination starts. But the process, however gradual, however difficult, is worth it. And not for the person to who hurts you, for your heart, for your blood pressure, for your immune system, for your sleep, and for your quality of life. So your body is paying for what someone else did to you. So forgiveness is the way you stop paying. Now I want to shift the energy completely, because everything we have talked about so far has been the damage that negative emotions do, and I want to spend time on the other side because the science of positive emotions is just as remarkable and a lot more encouraging. Now I want to start with laughter. When you genuinely laugh, not a polite chuckle, but a real deep, uncontrolled laugh, something extraordinary happens in your body. Your brain releases a cocktail of beneficial chemicals, endorphins, the body natural painkillers and mood elevators are released, reducing the perception of pain and producing a feeling of well-being. So Dopamine is released as a reward chemical that produces pressure and motivation, and serotonin, which regulates blood, increases, and the stress hormones cortisol and adrenaline decreases measurably. You know, laughter relaxes the muscle throughout the body. After a good laugh, muscle tension reduces for up to 45 minutes. Laughter reduces blood pressure, and blood pressure vessels dilate when you laugh. So, improving blood flow and reducing pressure. Laughter boosts the immune system and increasing the activity of natural killer cells that fight infection and disease. And laughter improves cardiovascular function. So, increasing heart rate and oxygen consumption during the laugh, followed by a period of relaxation that benefits the heart. And there is a form of therapy called laughter yoga, which was developed by a physician specifically because the body cannot tell the difference between genuine laughter and stimulated laughter. Now, the physical benefits of laughter are produced by the physical act of laughing, even if it starts by forcing it. The body responds the same way. How much do you laugh genuinely? You know, how much do you laugh? Is it genuinely, deeply, freely laugh? Because in the middle of all the weights we carry, the bills, the responsibilities, the worries, the grief. So laughter is not frivolous. It is medicine. Now let us talk about joy, not happiness, which is often linked to external circumstances, but joy, deep, settled, present moment joy, the kind that does not depend on everything going right. Joy activates the parasympathetic nervous system in the rest and digest mode. It reduces cortisol, it lowers blood pressure, it improves immune function, and people who score high on measures of positive emotion have been shown to live longer. So have lower rates of cardiovascular disease, they recover faster from illness, and they have stronger immune response to vaccines. And gratitude, the deliberate practice of noticing and appreciating what is good in your life, has been studied extensively, and the findings are remarkable. People who practice regular gratitude have lower blood pressure, better sleep, stronger immune function, lower rates of depression and anxiety. So greater sense of social connection. Interestingly, people who write down things they are grateful for regularly show changes in brain activity in areas associated with reward, motivation, and moral cognition. So gratitude literally changes the brain. Now we are coming to the end of our time, and I want to leave you with some very practical things you can actually do starting today, to protect your physical health through your emotional life. One, name what you are carrying. Write it down if you need to. Is it anger, grief, worry, loneliness, unforgiveness? I want you to give it a name because what is named can be addressed, and what stays unnamed stays in the body indefinitely. Two, find a safe place to express it. A trusted friend, a family member, a counselor, a journal, a prayer closet. Emotions that are expressed move through the body, and emotions that are suppressed stay in the body. So find somewhere safe to let them out. Three, move your body. Exercise is one of the most powerful emotional regulation tools available. It burns off stress hormones, it releases endorphins, it improves mood, it interrupts the cycle of rumination. Even a 20 minutes walk changes the body chemistry significantly. Four, prioritize laughter and joy deliberately. Schedule time with people who make you laugh. Do things that bring you genuine pleasure. Watch something funny. Play with children. These are not indulgences, no, they are health practices. Fifth, start a gratitude practice. Every morning or every night, write down three things you are grateful for. Not big dramatic things, small everyday things. The food you ate, a kind word someone said, a moment of quiet, the simple practice done consistently. Rewrite the brain toward positive awareness and has a measurable physical health benefit. And lastly, seek professional support for what you cannot carry alone. A counselor, a psychologist, a therapist. These are not for people who are broken, no. They are for people who are human and who are carrying more than one person should carry alone. So we've been here for almost an hour, and I want to say something before I let you go. Emotional life is not separate from your physical health, no. Every feeling you carry, every hunger, every grief, every worry, every loneliness, every unforgiveness is living somewhere in your body, in your blood pressure, in your immune system, in your guts, in your heart, in your brain. So, and every joy, every laugh, every moment of genuine gratitude, every connection that makes you feel truly seen, this this live in your body too, and in lower blood pressure, in a stronger immune system, in a longer life, in a better quality every year you are here. So you cannot separate how you feel from how you are. They are one thing. So take your emotional health seriously, not as a luxury, not as something to address after everything else is handled, as a medical priority because it is one. And the anger you release from your heart benefits, the grief um, you process your immune system benefits, the worry you address your gut benefit, the forgiveness you choose for your blood pressure benefits, the laughter you allow your whole body benefits. So take care of yourself, not just the physical parts that show up in a blood test. All of you, the part that feel, the part that remember, the part that love and lose and hope and fear. So all of those parts are you, and all of them deserve care. Please, I want you to like this video. If today changed how you see your own emotional life, leave a comment. Tell me one emotion you are going to take more seriously as a health matter after today. Subscribe so you never miss a Thursday, and please share this because somewhere out there is a person who has been told their emotions are not a health issue, and today we prove that they are. I'll see you next Thursday. Take care of yourself.